It was just after the morning rush when people on a quiet street in Amagasaki heard a metallic scream cut across the neighborhood. A JR West commuter train appeared where no train should be. Tilted, skidding, sparks spitting from steel, the lead car knifing off the tracks and into the first floor of a 9-story apartment building. Glass burst outward. Concrete dust rolled into the sunlight. Inside, commuters were thrown forward as seats tore loose and handrails bent like wire. Phones fell silent mid-call. From the second car back, someone shouted for help. From the first, there was only the hiss of ruptured air lines and a settling groan. At 9:18 a.m. on April 25, 2005, a rapid service train on the Fukuchiyama line derailed at speed on a tight curve just before Amagasaki Station, Hyogo Prefecture, Japan. The posted speed on that radius was 70 kilometers per hour. The investigation would later say the train entered at roughly 100 to 120 kilometers per hour. In seconds, 7 carriages left the rails. 2 jackknifed into the building's parking level, others piled into a compressed accordion of steel and plastic. Within minutes, sirens converged: local fire, police, ambulances, and JR West's own emergency crews. The scene looked less like a derailment than a collision between 2 different worlds, the controlled geometry of a railway and a civilian apartment block that happened to stand beside it. The first task was triage. Firefighters and railway staff cut through twisted doors with saws and hydraulic spreaders. Survivors crawled out through broken windows and walked, stunned, into the street where neighbors offered towels and water. Rescuers marked the carriages with paint, worked compartment by compartment, and called out for silence to listen for tapping. The lead car, crushed into the building, was the worst. Its roof had peeled back, its floor was buckled. Getting in meant working through a concrete mouth with rebar for teeth. Once the last fires were suppressed and the immediate evacuations done, investigators began their own methodical work. They retrieved the train's event recorder. They measured wheel marks on the ballast, the distance to the curve, the scarring on the railhead, and the angles of the cars where they came to rest. They mapped the driver's actions in the minutes before impact. Throttle changes, brake applications, the moment an emergency command might have been too late. They also traced the trip itself, because crashes begin long before the moment metal meets concrete. That morning's service had been on a tight schedule. At the previous stop, the train reportedly overshot the platform, an overrun that forced a corrective reverse move and cost precious seconds. In most systems, a small delay is a minor inconvenience. On this line, with packed headways and a culture that treated punctuality as a promise, it meant pressure. Passengers heard the motor surge on the following stretch as the driver tried to make up time. Multiple witnesses later described a sensation of unusual speed as the train approached the curve. The curve itself had history. A sharp bend cut into a dense urban plan, with a warning and a speed restriction but no automatic speed control that could enforce compliance on that class of train. The onboard protection in use, designed to prevent a train from passing a signal at danger, did not automatically reduce speed for civil curves. That task remained with the human in the cab. On a normal morning, that was enough. On a morning when a young driver was behind schedule and possibly worried about disciplinary consequences, it was not. Discipline mattered because it shaped behavior. At the time, JR West used a regimen widely reported afterward. If a driver made operational errors, he could be sent to re-education at a company facility. Days spent writing reports by hand, reciting rules, facing supervisors, and by many accounts, public embarrassment. For a junior employee, the threat loomed large. The investigation found no single memo ordering speed at any cost. It didn't need one. Culture filled the gaps. You did not make customers late. You did not make dispatchers late. You did not make your colleagues fix your mistake. Passenger accounts gave the timeline shape. Somewhere after the overrun, the train ran hard. In the last seconds, passengers felt brakes bite, but deceleration on steel takes distance you don't have when you enter a tight bend too fast. The wheels climbed the rail. The car bodies swung outward. Gravity took over. Rescue continued into the night, floodlights turning the street as bright as noon. Neighbors brought onigiri and tea to crews who would not leave the pile. Families waited at a makeshift reception center with lists of names and photos on their phones. By the next day, the casualty figures hardened into numbers that would not move. More than 100 dead and hundreds injured. One of the worst peacetime rail disasters in modern Japanese history. Among the dead was the driver. For engineers, the physical causes were clearest: speed over limit on a curve of known geometry, insufficient margin to recover once the limit was exceeded, car bodies that telescoped under lateral load and intrusion. But the inquiry widened the lens. Why did the driver enter the curve too fast? Why was a human the only thing standing between a known hazard and a catastrophic outcome? Why were penalties structured in a way that might push a junior employee to gamble seconds against physics? J.R. West faced hard questions. Within months, the company began installing an upgraded automatic train stop system with speed control capability, ATSP, on the line, designed to enforce speed reductions for curves and civil restrictions, not just signals, by calculating a braking profile and intervening early if a driver did not. They revised operating manuals, increased simulator training, and reviewed route risk maps to add extra signage and audible reminders before tight bends. Dispatch procedures were changed so that small delays would be acknowledged and absorbed rather than silently punished. Management also set public targets for safety investments after years in which efficiency metrics had dominated earnings calls. Courts and prosecutors did their own work, looking at liability up and down the organization. They considered the design of the timetable, the training and supervision of new drivers, the placement of the apartment building relative to the right-of-way, and the company's safety governance. Families pressed for answers beyond a single human error line on a PowerPoint slide. If a system relies on the least experienced person to be perfect at speed, families argued, the system has failed before the day begins. The story has a human center because railways carry people with lives in progress. In the lists were a university student on the way to class, a nurse finishing a night shift, an office worker who had texted that morning to say he would be on time, a grandmother going to meet a friend, a child who loved trains. Survivors described small details that never left them: the smell of hot dust when the car met concrete, the sudden quiet after the noise, the stranger's hand that held theirs until the rescuers pried the door, the way light looked when they finally stepped out. Many later struggled with injuries that were not obvious at first: back damage, hearing loss, a fear of enclosed spaces. Some never returned to work. Some never boarded a train again. The apartment building's scar bore witness long after the media left. Patched concrete, replaced pillars, a new paint line where the old one could not be matched. Residents changed how they listened to morning sounds. People on the street who had seen the train come off the rails checked their watches differently. A minute lost no longer felt like an affront worth chasing. Train crews on that line began to announce small delays without apology and with a new phrase: "Thank you for your understanding." When the final report landed, it did not read like a mystery solved so much as a sequence explained. The curve was where it had always been. The limit had not changed. The technology in place did what it was designed to do, and nothing more. The driver made a mistake under pressure, and that pressure did not come from the timetable alone. The company accepted fault, at least in public, and promised structural changes. The families kept photos on mantles and names on memorials and measured promises against anniversaries. If there is a lesson worth carrying forward, it is that safety is a layered thing. A rule is one layer. A person's judgment is another. So is a device that acts when judgment slips, and a culture that makes it acceptable to arrive 1 minute late rather than risk everything. When those layers thin or line up wrong, an error that should be survivable becomes a disaster that pulls apart steel and lives. Every weekday morning, trains still round that curve. The apartment stands, its repaired corner now just another shadow in the sun. The line has new signals, new code running behind the glass, new procedures that give drivers and dispatchers room to breathe. From the platform, you can hear the approach as a rising hum, see the carriages lean and recover, and watch as a machine and a system keep faith with the people inside. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.